Welcome to Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu Podcast, episode 112. I'm Lucas Pinckard, and I'm here with
Isaac Tauaefa.
So we've lovingly titled this episode Finger Guns 2.0.
Okay. I was, which is, okay.
This is not true, by the way.
Immediately regret, right before we start filming, you're like, hey, who's running point today? I'm like, I don't care. He's like, cool, I got it.
I got
I'm like,
it.
okay,
Yeah.
now I instantly regret.
Yeah.
I instantly regret it. But
we need...
it's okay.
We need a Finger
Don't
Guns
say
shirt.
it.
We need Finger Guns merch. No. I think that is one of our most cherished episodes. You know?
I think it's one of your most cherished episodes, and that there's some
certainly one of the more proud moments
weird
that I had just watching all of the faces of everybody on the panel go
turn green with
what
a
is he
puking
talking
feeling.
about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there are some
It's fantastic. I don't even know what
friends.
episode
They're
that
weirdos,
was.
but there are friends out there who were like, hitting us up about the Finger Guns episode.
Yeah, every now and then somebody will bring it up to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. It's just a great hypothetical. It's like, what if we woke up in the morning and finger guns were actual guns?
No.
I don't think we need to go any further than that, but you can go back and listen to the archive
Go ahead.
and watch all four of us go, huh.
Imagining the possibilities.
Yeah. So
They're
many
endless.
possibilities. Yep.
They're endless. Well,
Yeah.
it's great to be with you this
Is
morning. It is.
Seems like you might be
Despite
having
that,
second thoughts about that. Yeah.
Despite that, it is really good. Yeah, just good to be here. We were here recently for the JP Donnell podcast.
Yeah, which will be out end of this week.
Yep. So that was a
You
great
are
time with
heavily
you.
featured on that podcast.
Yeah, which is weird again for me because it was a interview. Which of course we do these podcasts and we toss it back and forth to each other and play off that. But that was new. I mean, it was just really an interview and a lot of questions about just upbringing and all kinds of stuff. So
Did it make you uncomfortable to be the center of attention?
that is a weird feeling.
Is
I
it?
don't enjoy that. Yeah, I don't enjoy it. I like sharing that. I like the volleyball thing, with just a little here, a little there. Let's just kind of spread it around a little bit. But it is weird when it just the
Banter
spotlight has to
is
stay
what they call
on
that. You like banter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Speaking of banter, I miss Strauss, man. Strauss, I love just ripping
Did
into
something
that
happen to
dude.
him?
He hasn't been on the pod in a
Yeah,
while.
no, he's so busy.
Yeah, that's why I miss him. But miss that little guy, that little nerd. I'm hoping he's going to be listening to
Oh, no
this
doubt
driving
about it.
across the country. So I just want him to know. I want him to. He's going to pull his phone up. He's going to send me a voice message because he's driving.
Yep.
And he's
It's a
going to say
responsible thing to do.
something heinous to me. But that is the power of friendship, which is the topic of today's episode,
Yeah.
which we'll get into in just a minute.
So we have nothing to do with finger guns, actually.
Nothing, no.
Oh, well.
No. Unless it unites you in friendship.
Which I think it could.
That actually...
Maybe I'll start rewriting proverbs.
That's actually breaking us up. The
Yeah.
finger guns thing. It's
divisive.
It's divisive. I know Brent is out there shaking his head right now, like
Black belt Brent.
freaking finger guns. Yeah. He's like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino.
Oh, is he really?
No, I mean just
I
about the
could
finger
see
guns
that.
thing, which is funny because
I think so many people are about the finger guns.
well, also it's hilarious because Clint Eastwood.
Used
it's
he
been out
used
for a
it.
long time.
Yeah,
but
this is not a spoiler alert. He uses the finger gun in the thing.
gets him killed.
Maybe that's what motivated. Maybe that's where the idea came from. In the recesses of my mind, there was Clint Eastwood's finger guns, and I was like, you know what? That's it.
That's the redeeming piece of the finger guns
Make
thing.
my
It brings
day.
me back to
Gran
thinking
Torino.
about Gran Torino. So,
Crazy. Do we have a sponsor for today's
yes.
episode?
So
Will you get to it already?
yeah. So the sponsor for today's podcast episode is Fighter's Passport. Fighter's Passport is an app that was developed to connect gyms to athletes who are traveling or new to an area. The app puts the gyms in a space where they can provide clear and concise information for athletes to utilize in finding a place to train. The goal is to help folks find their mat away from home or their new home mat. Fighter's Passport. Less screen time, more mat time. Athletes can head over to create their profile at app.fighterspassport.com. And right now, and this is there might be some updated information I need to get from Tyler, but I think you could probably still do this. Log in with Google or Facebook. Log in there to create a profile on fighterspassport.com. And then if you have any questions, gym owners can email Tyler at fighterspassport.com, and he will help them get their gym presence up and running. You can follow them on Instagram, Fighters Passport. So Fighters Passport is amazing. We're great friends with Tyler Ross, who is the founder of that. And they've been incredible. I talked about them a little bit on the JP Donnell podcast. It'll come out at the end of the week. Because of their involvement in helping us get our next Jiu-Jitsu instructor at the next J&JJ event coming up on May 24th. So Marcus Buchecha Almeida, absolute monster, one of the most dominant champions of all time. What an honor to have him come do our event. But Fighters Passport is the people that made it happen. Both in the introduction that I got to Marcus and then also helping to make it possible to bring him out here. So
yeah, covering some of those expenses, travel and all those kinds of things that we got to get to get him out. Pretty rad. Yeah,
so they are an incredible organization, and behind the app is a man who loves the Lord and is serving him with everything that he's got. So shout out to Tyler Ross. Shout out to Fighters Passport. Thank you for making this episode podcast, the episode of the podcast possible, and our next event a banger. So, and then also, as always, thank you to Jocko Fuel.
Yep. JockoFuel.com. Cleanest supplements on the market, like literally the cleanest supplements on the market. I think nearly everything is third-party tested. You hear me talk a lot about creatine. It's one of the big ones. They've got one of the purest creatines that's out there. It's not one that's like packed full of rice flour, or if you go get those creatine gummies, you get them and they're like, oh, take 4 gummies and you'll get 5 grams of creatine. And what they're finding is like when you do the third-party testing, it's really more like 1.5 grams of creatine in 5 gummies.
I don't like that.
Yeah. So, but the Jocko stuff is legit. And this year, the 680th study came out to talk about the benefits of creatine from kids 2 years old to adults in their 80s, that between 2 and 5 grams a day can really make a difference in sleep, in cognitive function, in muscle and bone density, all kinds of stuff. So check that out. They get some of the best creatine that's out there on the market. And, the Discipline Go, always nice for a little pick-me-up right before rolling.
Jiu-Jitsu.
That was one of the things. So Kirsten is a big coffee drinker. Kirsten, my wife, is a big coffee drinker, and we might have 2-3 cups of coffee a day. Not because we want the caffeine, but because we just really enjoy coffee. But the problem with coffee is the crash. Yeah. Right. You get a nice, Tanzanian pea berry coffee that you got, through your V60 and the aromas and everything are just perfect. You sip on that for a little bit and you're feeling great. And then all of a sudden there's a dip. Yeah. Dip in the energy levels. So she's got on the Jocko Fuel too. She knows, she's running around the house chasing 2 toddlers right now. And we're like, energy levels are down. She's like, I know I got to do stuff during nap time, but I want to be with the kids, meaning in nap zone.
Yeah, right.
And she's got
totally understandable.
Yep, goes in there and cracks open a Discipline Go, gets her fired up. When the kids get up, there's no crash.
I love that.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's been really good for her, and only 95 milligrams of caffeine, so it's not like it's pumping you full of caffeine. You're as I started to refer to them yesterday, your cholesterol delivery systems, i.e. veins, will not be filled with all this sort of like jittery caffeine stuff. Yeah. Only the good stuff. So,
Kim likes it too. She's pretty sensitive to stuff. I mean, she responds well to like if it's medicine or vitamins or whatever, she usually can feel a difference pretty quickly.
They call that having a low constitution.
No, I didn't know.
Which I hate because I respond well to a lot of leg stem stuff. And then my doctor was like, yeah, well, you just have a low constitution. I was like, no, I don't.
Don't call it that.
You call it anything else.
Yeah, make it a positive thing. Yeah. But it's a good thing. But she loves the goes because she feels all that energy, no crash. She's not jittery. It's not too much caffeine.
And get on the Jocko Fuel website, use code JJJ10, and you'll save 10% on all that stuff. And if you sign up for the text messages, I don't know if you know this or not, the text messages, they give you a little extra boost. So if you need to buy one time without using our code so that you can save like 20%, that's fine. We'll forgive you.
We'll understand.
Sold to Jesus. But if you're on the text messages, Monday morning, Jocko sends out like a little 30-second inspirational message.
Oh, sweet.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of people convinced that Jocko just like calls me on Monday to try to help me out. Just give me a little boost. And
that's
wow.
Nice. That's a good way to get your week started right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Levi really enjoys it.
Yeah. Well, thank you to Jocko Fuel, as always, for making the episode possible. It's great to be here with you guys. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Man, I hear pretty much every day from someone new that reaches out that says, "Hey, man, I've been listening to the podcast for a while," or "Hey, I just found the podcast and I've been really encouraged. Thank you guys for what you're doing." And
I don't know where to get them finger guns.
No, and they're like,
nope.
Yeah, exactly. They haven't made it to the finger guns episode yet, but I know that it'll come crashing down as soon as
likely.
Hey, man, I just hit the finger guns episode, and I want to give you an update. I stopped.
Well,
listening.
I was in timeout after
listening
after that episode for a little while. Like, if you notice, there's a few episodes without me on there. They were like,
"Is that what did it? That was it."
Yeah, that was it. It was it. You were a part of that email thread.
Oh, my
Lucas is now no longer allowed. Pastor Pinckard has been removed from the podcast until he can get his act together.
Yeah.
You did say, do you have a topic other than this?
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be that.
Yeah.
Well, no. So, friendship is the topic of today's episode, and really, it comes out of this. It's cool because this is something I was going to read from this book a couple weeks ago, and I ended up not bringing the book with me. We talked about something else, but yesterday. At the Village, Matt was preaching about biblical masculinity, and one of the things he talked about was...
He started a whole new series on this, right?
Yep. So it's a 3-week series on masculinity right after he got done with the attributes of God. He went through a whole series about the attributes of God.
Was that one longer than 3 weeks?
Yeah, that one was.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he crammed it all in. Yeah. It was really good, but he was kind of just highlighting some of the big ones there, and then we went into... now biblical masculinity, and man, it was such an amazing message that he kicked off for the series. But something he mentioned in his message came from this book. So this is the book that I've been studying with Matt over the last eight weeks maybe, and he took a piece of this. I mean, this is I heard echoes of some of this stuff in his message, and it was a lot about masculinity. It was like, he talked about the importance of men having other men to be vulnerable with and to talk to. And I mentioned a little of that on JP's podcast, but as advice for like how to deal with hardships in life. Yeah. But the biggest piece of this is that men have an avenue they have an outlet other than their wife, because their wife will bear a lot of the weight of things that she really isn't equipped to carry. So your wife is like your best friend. My wife is my best friend. I'm so close to her, but I can't put all the full weight of the things that I'm thinking about and concerned about and like sometimes worried about on her, because she's got her own things going on, and also she has strengths to help encourage me, but it doesn't help her if I lay all of the heaviness of everything I'm going through on her. So but men, brothers, which is the verse that I want you to share. I'm going to read this part of it first, and then I'm going to have you share that verse if you can.
I can.
All right.
I am capable.
Ridiculous.
I believe I am.
Okay, so this is from chapter 4 of fighting, or chapter 3, sorry. The shadow of loneliness. And it's hard to figure out a starting point because there's just so much good here. So I'm going to start reading right at the beginning of this page, at the end of page 36. Unwanted solitude. A recent study revealed some interesting insights about the impact of loneliness. A group of men was brought in and asked to fill out a brief personality questionnaire. Then they were assigned to different feedback groups. Here's the catch. The participants thought they were assigned to groups based on their personality questionnaires they'd filled out, but they were divided up randomly. The 3 groups were future belonging group, future alone group, and the misfortune control group. The future belonging group was told after the questionnaire, you're the type who has rewarding relationships throughout your life. You're likely to have a long and stable marriage and have friendships that last into your later years. The odds are that you'll always have friends and people who care about you. The future alone group was told the opposite. You're the type who will end up alone later in life. You may have friends and relationships now, but by your mid-20s, most of these will have drifted away. You may even marry or have several marriages, but these are likely to be short-lived and not continue into your 30s. Relationships don't last when you're past the age where people are constantly forming new relationships. The odds are you'll end up being alone more and more. Finally, the misfortune control group was basically a control group to see if negative feedback in general affected the males, or just negative feedback specifically pertaining to their social isolation. They were told you're likely to be accident prone later in life. You might break an arm or a leg a few times, maybe injured in a car accident. Even if you haven't been accident prone before, these things will show up later in life, and the odds are you will have a lot of accidents. The results were striking to the point it made me ask, are we really that impressionable? The future belonging and misfortune control groups were basically unaffected by the feedback and showed no adverse consequences. But there were dramatic behavior changes in the future alone group. According to Joyner, in the laboratory, they engaged in more aggressive behavior, less helpful behavior toward others, more self-defeating behavior. But one thing future alone participants tend to not display, very surprisingly, is negative mood or distress. Instead, their mood state is best characterized as numb. The negative feedback didn't make them observably grumpy or sad. Rather, the prospect of being doomed to loneliness essentially froze and dulled them. And that's exactly what loneliness does. According to Joyner, loneliness is the experience of unwanted solitude and disconnection. Further, loneliness has two facets, social isolation and emotional isolation, with emotional loneliness being the symptom of the root of the problem, social isolation. So this is just giving, they use that study as an example to illustrate that our tendency to the prospect of being lonely or the experience of being lonely is not often, yes, there's some anger there, there's some frustration, but mostly what it does is it makes us numb, men. And so the cure for that numbness caused by loneliness is friendship, is fellowship. And so I'm going to get into that part. Let's see. All too often we reach a place where we can't feel anything. And at first glance, we may think it's because we're strong, that it's a superpower to move through life without being overwhelmed by emotions. But the reality is that we are suffering and dying on the inside, and we are just too numb to realize it. Some of you might be wondering, can loneliness really kill? The answer is yes. Loneliness can, in fact, be just as strong a predictor for illness and death as smoking, obesity, and high blood pressure. Sleep is also less restorative for those who are lonely. Loneliness weakens your immune system. It also increases the risk of dying of heart disease, cancer, and stroke. The research on loneliness as it relates to mortality is especially staggering. In one meta-analysis, a study of other studies, researchers found that data across 308,000 individuals followed for an average of 7.5 years indicated that individuals with adequate social relationships have a 50% greater likelihood of survival compared to those with poor or insufficient social relationships. I'm going to skip down here. The real cure for loneliness is friendship. Deep, enriching, beautiful, long-term friendship. But many guys don't have many friends. Have you ever heard the joke that the reason men golf is because they're too afraid to ask each other to go on walks together? There's some truth in that.
I've never heard that.
That's funny.
That's awesome.
Maybe another way to put it is that they don't know how to be good friends. Okay, so this is the piece. This is the I was reading the context so that we could get to the friendship piece. So bear with me. 3 more pages. Faced with the realization of my own loneliness, this is, I think, this book is written by Jefferson Bethke and John Tyson. I'm not sure who's writing here.
One of them.
Guaranteed. Mm-hmm. Faced with the realization of my own loneliness, I started doing some research. I do this when I'm facing a problem. I can't stop asking, what's the solution? Is there any objective way to find friends, or at least to understand how people become friends? I wanted to understand, not just out of curiosity, but because I looked around and realized I didn't have many friends. I had acquaintances and guys I could call in emergencies, but all my male friendships felt like they were on the wrong trajectory. Instead of getting richer and deeper over time, every friendship I had seemed to be getting more depleted with each year passing. As it turns out, there is some robust research into friendship. One of the studies I found to be most compelling began in 1934 and is still going today, called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. Yes, you read that right, a study that has been going on for 90 years. Researchers at Harvard created a combined group of Harvard graduates and low-income teenage boys in Boston, all of whom were willing to let the researchers track them for their entire lives. These researchers measured anything and everything: DNA samples, psychological problems, marriages, deaths, and so on. In fact, 25 of the men donated their brains to the program after they died. The data had been rock solid in demonstrating one very specific thing. Surprising even the team of researchers, strong relationships matter more than just about anything else. They affect outcomes for men's lives more than IQ, social class, and money. Of all the metrics these researchers have been tracking, relationships clearly and definitively have the most bearing on the men's satisfaction levels. Let's rephrase that in a more personal way for you. As you think about the next 12 months of your life after reading this book, what do you see as the best use of your time? Some might argue it would be spending energy toward startup phase of a business. Some might say focusing on physical health and exercise. And of course, those kinds of things are important. But the best use of your time in terms of how much it will impact your life emotionally, physically, and spiritually has been verifiably shown to be investing in deepening your relationships. Then it goes on to talk about kind of the key ingredients that make friendships strong. It says there's 3 factors: proximity, unplanned interactions, and vulnerability. Okay, so just a brief explanation of those, and then Lucas, I want to get your thoughts on this. But it says the first 2 seem so light. Proximity, simply being near each other, and unplanned interactions, such as running into each other without a calendar invite, are really the biggest factors in developing strong relationships. Yeah, that is pretty much all it takes. And yet, most things in our culture fight against those simple but foundational ingredients for healthy friendships. Think about our culture and technological advancements we've achieved over the last 50 to 70 years. A lot of large breakthroughs directly impede our ability to do these 3 things. Take the car, for example. What an achievement, but now we no longer walk. We are no longer limited to blocks and steps with small towns. We rarely think about anything needing to be within walking distance. The new world of car transportation fundamentally changed how we engage with one another. We don't encounter one another anymore. We drive past one another, often alone, on the way to work, the store, or church. As one author put it, we grind along together anonymously, often in misery. And then there's another piece of it, another subchapter called Mastering the Hang. It's talking about putting together something purposeful. So you need community, you need fellowship. And so if you don't have it, if there's not a thing that you can go do, then it says create it. Like, you're responsible for that. And because you know now, because of all the context of what the book laid out, how important it is for you to have those deepening relationships, friendships that deepen over time and don't stay surface level, are not topical, but vulnerable and real. Now that you know how important that is, if you don't already have it, you have to create it. And so, and I have conversations with guys all the time that are like, man, I feel like I'm on an island. I'm by myself. I feel, I hate to admit this, but I'm lonely. I feel alone. And I hear it all the time. That's the reality. The book said that, but I also see it play out in conversations I have with men all the time. And so, my encouragement, and Lucas, I want to get your thoughts, but part of my encouragement to those men is if you do not have that community, you have to create it. And the way you create it is by the way that the book recommends is a really simple thing. And this is something that Matt Chandler did with me and 3 or 4 other guys, where he said, hey, I want to get together every Thursday night with a small group of guys around the fire pit. And it was cool. So we started that in January, and we've been doing that consistently. And what it's built, it's fostered relationships between the guys that are there, these conversations. And what's cool is, like Matt does, according to this book, it's like, do not keep it surface level. Like, set the tone early on that this is a place that you are allowed to be vulnerable and allowed to talk about things that you're going through. And actually, you kind of need to do that because you don't want to go home and dump all of the weight of this on your wife. She's made to comfort and to help advise and that's great. But your brothers are made to bear the weight of all of the weight of the heaviness of the things that you're dealing with and walking through. So that's what he's been doing, and I've seen it played out, and I have a few of those groups in my life I'm grateful for. One of them is our group message or group text that we have for our podcast and Jesus in Jiu-Jitsu. One of them is the community of Jiu-Jitsu guys that I train with regularly. One of them is a Bible study that we do right after our Tuesday morning class. The other one is the Jesus in Jiu-Jitsu. So I have 8 of them or something, and man, it's enriched my life. So
yeah, I would have to say all of that seems really spot on. We talked a little bit about a book called Mansfield's Guide to Manliness, or Mansfield's Manly Men by Stephen Mansfield a while back, and I had the opportunity to talk to him a couple of years ago, and we were discussing this exact thing, right? So he's got a series of books, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, Building Your Band of Brothers, and Man on Fire, and the second one is really focused around this because it's something that we don't really have anymore, and it feels weird to say it, but it's almost like a step-by-step guide on how to build a brotherhood wherever you're at.
That's awesome.
We took some of those principles at our church, particularly right after COVID, as people were re-engaging and trying to figure things out, because the thing that worried me the most was the amount of people that I knew during and right after the pandemic, particularly guys in my position, other pastors, who were taking their own lives.
Oh man.
And there was a commonality in the notes that they left, that there was some thing, some phrase or something which clearly indicated the sentiment of, I don't have one good friend.
Yeah.
And when he and I were talking about that, he goes, that's actually across the board.
Yep.
When men do that, that is the number one thing that is found in all of those notes. Yeah. Even if they have a loving wife, kids and all of that they don't have one good male friend. You were talking about, the reason that guys golf is because they don't want to ask each other to go on walks. Yeah. There's a meme that's gone around for the last several years. It says Jesus' first miracle was having 12 friends in his 30s, right? That's, it's one of those things, right? That most of the time, the people that we really invest into relationship with, that if by 25, those folks aren't around anymore, those guys aren't around anymore, it's likely that we're not going to re-engage with other guys, that we're going to invest in our romantic relationships, until we get married, and then after that into our kids. And so we will purposefully distance ourselves because of where we feel like that investment needs to go. So I think that those are all things that, we really need to take a look at. And from a professional standpoint, when I was playing music, the way that you got gigs was by being a good hang. And that's what we would talk about in the studio. Right. Is we would bring in, we'd be playing with a band, or there would be a group of musicians, and we'd work together on a couple of albums. And then someone would be like, all right, well, I really think we need an organ player for this, for this album. And we're like, I don't know. Yeah. Do we need organ? Who listens to organ? And they're like, no, we need it. It's this and this. And so we were like, all right, well, and they would bring people in. And the first question was not are they great musicians, or did they, okay, was he a very good hang? It's no. Yeah. So, and then they were just fired, right? Yeah. And they didn't know why they didn't get the gig. And so much of it was dependent upon not their skill as a musician, but could they fit in, even if they were weird or different than us or whatever, right? There were a couple of guys that were great hangs that never, we would talk for a couple of hours and they would say 3 words, but the 3 words they said were you guys are idiots. And we would all crack up and we're like, that's perfect. So, it just made that thing. And so being able to hang out with people is such an important skill to have. So, I'm listening to that and I'm like, being a good hang is such an important thing, but, creating the space for that to happen. Yep. So one of the things we did with our men's ministry as we were trying to help build relationships, because we realized that we are disconnected, the group of guys that we had prior to COVID is not the group of guys that we had after. Right. and people went to different churches, or some guys unfortunately like never re-engaged, and even though like we've reached out to them and tried to get them, it wasn't happening, and other people moved away, and so it was just about a third of the guys were the same post-COVID, but the other 65-70% or whatever, they were new guys. And so we were like, how do we do this? How do we build relationships now with these guys who don't know each other? Because this is going to be the foundation of what our church is going to be built on moving forward. So we rented a campground. We found a local campground. It was like $15 to get it for the night, and we made a bunch of coffee and put it in, the big like Cambro containers. We got a couple of those. Put coffee in them. Put hot chocolate in, or just hot water with some hot chocolate packets in another one. It was cold, so we brought those out there. We started a fire. We told the guys, bring lawn chairs. If you want to smoke a cigar, smoke a cigar. If you want to, do whatever else, come over and hang out. And there's no agenda.
Yeah,
we're just gonna sit around the fire and talk. Bring your kids if you want to.
That's the best, man.
And what happened was these guys, the first time we just all got together and we were kind of introducing ourselves to each other. There wasn't, like we said, there wasn't any agenda. We had a couple of guys bring fishing poles, and so they tossed them in the lake, and the rest of us were making fun of them for not catching anything. And pretty soon, the guys all started to open up to one another about some of the stuff that was going on. Well, then the next phase, that next month, we were a little bit more intentional about, asking how we can pray for one another and what's going on. And, there were some great conversations that came out of that. In particular with, we had some guys who were getting ready to buy homes. And, Kirsten and I have been in that market for a couple of years trying to figure stuff out and seeing if the right thing is there. But the housing market has been crazy. It's not new news to anybody. But I remember those conversations as we were talking about this other stuff. As Kirsten and I are going through them, and these conversations are years old. And I remember the encouragement that those guys got around there of like, it wasn't don't tell your wife this, but it was be careful how you approach this.
There you go.
Right?
Yep.
When you sit down with a mortgage guy, when you look at the mortgage calculator online, then it's like, oh, you can get this. It's something ridiculous. You can get a $750,000 house for $1,600 a month, and you're like, oh, that's totally within my budget.
Yeah.
And what they don't tell you is like, you got to add mortgage insurance onto this and all this other stuff, and now all of a sudden, like, that's a $7,000 payment. You're like, how did this happen?
Right.
Well, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that mortgage calculator lied to you online.
Yeah.
But when you sit down and you actually start putting pen to paper, for a lot of men, like that becomes a really pressure-filled situation.
Yep.
Of okay, well, this is going to take, our margin is $1,000 a month. Like that is the extra that we have that we can, take some of that and put it into savings, or we can, go and do something with the family, or if there's an extra gas expense or whatever, like that's our margin is $1,000 a month. When you look at buying a home and it's like, hey, it's going to cost you, $600 more than what you got. We're like, whoa. That now we went from 1,000 to 400, which means if we want to go out to eat, that's blown like twice.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Or if there's any other like scary expense, something that comes up, something happens with the car or whatever. Now all of a sudden, like you're behind on everything.
Yep.
And we start to internalize those things, and they start to build up these kind of not just pressure, but like these micro resentments between us and our spouses, where we're like, you expect me to come, like you're dreaming about this, but now you're expecting me to come up with this money.
Yeah.
This is the pressure to be home is not going to change. The pressure to be at work isn't going to change, but the financial pressure is going to change. It's going to cost me. I'm going to have to work X amount of hours of overtime in order to make this happen. And you're going to hate that. And I can't talk to you about it.
Yeah. Yep.
Because you don't understand all of the pressure now that's on me as I'm trying to figure those things out of like, okay, this means instead of a 40-hour week, I'm going to work a 45-hour week every day for the next 30 years in order to make this happen.
Yep.
And in the midst of that, I'm going to be the one that's receiving text messages that are like, hey, when are you coming home?
Yeah.
When I'm not able to go to the kids' games. And even though none of this stuff has happened yet, right? You're just at the table having the conversations about like, hey, what do you think about this? Is this doable?
Yeah.
we don't want to say no because this is a family goal is to get this home or whatever the goal is, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be a home, but I know that's a big one for a lot of people right now, especially our generation, right? We internalize all of those things immediately as soon as that number is more than, whatever. And so,
because you know what it'll take.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how am I going to come up with an extra $1,000 a month?
Yep.
This means I don't get to see my kids so that they can have a place to live. Or, I mean, I guess if that's what I have to do, that's what I have to do. Yeah. And sometimes those are conversations that let me rephrase. There's a point in time at which you have to figure out how to have that conversation with your wife and to talk about how all of those things are being processed by you and the way that you need to look at it and fiscal responsibility and all of that stuff and what we actually can and can't do from a monetary standpoint. When you are in the heat of it and feeling all of that pressure and starting to want to disengage from the conversation and you're, in that moment where you're like, what is she expecting me to do? Is she really expecting me to shoulder all of this? Like she's talking about it like it's the greatest thing in the world, and all I'm looking at is that I'm going to be on the grind for the next 30 years, and this is, if we do this, it has the potential to ruin me. Yeah. That's when you go to your brothers.
You have to.
And you're like, hey, listen, we've been talking about this. I'm feeling a lot of pressure about it. This is the way I'm feeling. Where those guys, and this is what I saw around that fire, where they were like, bro, you'll be okay. Yeah. Right? Yep. Like, all right, so one, if you got to do it, you got to work 45 hours for the next, let's say it's the next couple of years. And you get that overtime in. You're doing 20 hours of overtime a week or a month. You'll be all right. Your company will likely give you raises. Yeah. Like, you're gonna get ahead at some point if you're staying true to it, And then the other things of like, well, if you saved for 5 more months, and you waited, then maybe you don't have to work that overtime, right? Because you put those things aside, and then all of a sudden, these things that these guys had never thought about, they're like, oh, okay,
yeah. And there's people. Once you start putting it out there, you're like, oh, this person had a very similar experience. This guy, he went through the same thing 5 years ago, and he can give me wisdom and advice. And
100%.
And like, man, I've been there before. I know what that's like. I had conversations with my wife the exact same way. Yeah. But like, how will you know that if the answer to that stress is to just like what lots of men do, which is just like fold it back in and keep it in here.
Yeah, because it's going to come out somewhere. Yeah, right? Yeah. And whether it's a home purchase, whether it's because you're in need of a new vehicle, heaven forbid it's something that has to do with like a medical issue with one of your kids, right? We're both dads of NICU babies. Yeah. Like, there were things in those moments that I was not going to talk to Kirsten about.
You can't. Because you have to, and this is something that in that group we've talked about, that men, that it's not that you can never be, I'm saying this with quotes for those that are listening, be weak in front of your wife. You need to be vulnerable to your wife. You need to be emotionally available and vulnerable to her all the time. But there are things that are so weighty for us that will crush your wife. And I'm not saying to keep things from your wife, but I am saying that temper those things. Take the edge off of that sharp blade of the fear or anxiety that you're having by going to your brothers first, passing it through that filter of how can I say this to my wife, and what things do I need to pass on to her, and what things are just kind of irrelevant details that would just only stress her out or weigh her down, that I can put on my brothers because they can handle it. And then they can also help me sift through that. And then now I can go to my wife with with a lighter load to tell her. Again, I'm not leaving details out to keep information from her. But there are some things I don't need to lay on my wife that my brothers are made to carry. Right. And I know you have that scripture.
Yeah. Proverbs 17:17. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a difficult time. Yeah. And that was, I look at that NICU statement, and that was massive. Yeah. That was massive in the growth of the relationship with Kirsten and I. It was massive in our development as parents and having conversations about who we wanted to be and what we wanted to do, but also in the relationship that I had with a couple of guys that were close to me who'd been in similar situations. The folks who visited us at the hospital, that was a big thing because there were some of those guys that I pulled out, and they're like, "Hey, how are you really doing?" I'm like, "Bro, this is killing me." Yep. Right? And Kay and I have had those conversations years down the road, right? Where, a couple of years later, we were looking at pictures and, we'd swipe over something and I would be like, that was a hard day.
Yeah.
And she's like, what was, she remembers it as this great day.
Right.
For me, it was a really hard day.
Yeah.
Because like I was exhausted and I'm trying to make it to where her and Levi can have a great day.
Right. Right.
There was a week Kirsten got sick. And so Levi's in the NICU and she can't go up there because she's running a fever.
Yep.
So I'm working because I'm back to work at this point. He's in the NICU and I got to take care of her because she's just in bad shape.
I've been there.
And I can't get sick because then neither of us
can go in the NICU.
Get to go see our baby.
Yeah, no skin on skin if you're able to hold him at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been the exact
right. And
yes.
So like if you want to talk about a pressure cooker of a situation, like that's it.
Yep.
Right.
And by the way, I don't know if you know this, stress is not good for your immune system.
I've heard about this.
Yeah.
So, but in that moment, right? Like, all right, so I'm at the hospital at 6 because we had our touch times were 6, 12, and 9.
Yep.
Right. So I'm at the hospital at 6, and then I'm taking. So I get done with the hospital. I get her skin time. I feed him. I change his diaper, hold him for a little bit, get him back to sleep. He's like 5 pounds at this point, so he's still itty bitty.
Yeah.
Get dressed, come home, take care of Kirsten, make sure she's got the stuff that she needs. Lunchtime or go to work. I'm at work for a couple of hours. Lunchtime hits. We're 11:45 back to the hospital, doing all the same things.
Yep.
Come home, check on her, back to work, and then when we get through that, now it's the next one. And it was the same thing, but everything was dependent upon me.
Yep.
And if I'm carrying that into that time in the NICU with the kid, they can feel that stress.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm taking that to Kirsten, she's already devastated.
Right, that she can't go up.
She's a new mom who's not allowed to hold her baby.
So physically feeling terrible and emotionally feeling terrible.
It's just broken.
Yeah.
Shattered. Right?
Yeah.
And all of the feelings of, having to, and now she can't nurse. Now she's got a pump, and we've got to do all of those things. It's an unfathomable amount of emotional and nurture distress on my wife at that moment. If I come home and I'm like,
I'm so wore out.
Yeah, like this sucks.
So stressed out.
Yeah, I can't believe you're sick and I got to go take care of the baby and
it's
blah
all
blah
falling
blah.
on me.
Yeah, that is not going to. That's not protecting your wife. That's not taking care of That's not taking care of your family.
Yeah,
tossing all of that onto her, and that's. I want to make sure people understand the conversation that we're having. We're not talking about like keeping things from your spouse, but what we are talking about is like there are those moments like that one exactly where the best thing to do is to freaking call somebody.
Agreed.
And say, my life sucks.
Yeah, that's not to hide things from her. That's to shield her from the weight of unnecessary weight she doesn't need to carry.
Yeah.
So like,
and like 6 months later, we talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that she was like, that was a really hard week for me. I was like, yeah, no doubt.
Right.
And she was like, yeah, you handled it so well. And I was like, bull crap.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I did what I had to do during those moments, but anytime I was going back and forth to the hospital, I was on the phone with somebody.
Yeah, that's.
I'm like, hey,
thank
pray
God
for me.
you leaned into that.
Yeah, this sucks.
Yes, pray for me.
Right.
Well, I mean, how many texts do we send to each other? Hey guys, say a prayer for me.
Yeah,
this is what I'm
100%.
going through, man.
Yep.
I'm sorry you're dealing with that. I'll be praying for you. Like, what do you need?
We talked about my situation we're going through with my family last week a little bit. One of the first things I did was shoot him a message to our Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu text and just say, hey, we don't have all the details for this. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. And even in that situation, right? Like there are certain burdens and things that we bear that are meant to be talked across. And now that we've had the opportunity, Kirsten and I, to talk about that, I was like, yeah, that was really tough for me. And then we can talk about all of those things that happened in the way that I was processing and all the stress. And then knowing the people when she knows the people that I leaned on during that time, that's great information for her to have.
Yeah.
Because if she's noticing things about like my behavior, if I'm, starting to slip a little bit, or I'm getting stressed out or something or whatever, she knows who to text.
Yep.
To say, hey,
reach out to so-and-so.
Check on your boy.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
check on your boy.
Yeah, like he's not doing bad, but he's not doing okay right now, and he's not. He needs somebody other than me to talk about it.
I think the thing. So for me, like one of the examples in my life that, or the emotions that I know that is not healthy for me to lay on my wife is if I'm anxious about something, or if I'm fearful. And again, fear is not. Obviously, we know that fear is not from the Lord, but it is a real thing that people go through all the time.
100%.
And if you share with your wife, it's not like you can't. I'm not saying you can never be weak in front of your wife.
Is such a fine line, right, to even talk about.
Yeah,
right?
but if my wife is also worried or concerned about this thing, like let's say there's been months where we were like, man, I just don't know how we're gonna make just the perfect storm of financial stuff hits, and we're like, man, I don't know how we're gonna pay our bills. I don't know. And if she's freaking out and anxious and fearful. And then I start telling her, I'm so scared I don't know how we're going to pay our bills, right?
Yeah.
That compounds it for her, because it's like, well, my husband is God is my refuge and my safety, but my husband is the covering for our household. And if he's concerned to this point where he's so worried that it's keeping him up at night and he doesn't, like, there's no rest or peace for her. So what I do is I don't just put on a brave face. I go to my brothers and I lay this heaviness on them and I say, man, I'm really concerned about this. I'm worried about this. I get some wisdom, some comfort, some direction from this godly counsel. And then now I can go to my wife with peace and it be genuine when I'm like, hey, look, I know this is what we're up against, but we don't need to be afraid. Like, this is what we're going to do. Here are some steps we can take to help alleviate some of this. And then also we're going to trust in the Lord. But the initial brunt of all the fear and anxiety and worry or anger or whatever you're going through, a brother is born for a time of adversity or
100%.
hardship. So you go to your brother first and you lay that heaviness on him. They'll help you sift through pieces of that, and then you take that cleaned up version to your wife, because now you can be more clear-headed, you can be more available, and you can be strong for her because she needs some of that strength to walk through. So this is man, I'm just very
it's such an important thing. And if you don't have somebody like that in your life, I have counseled a lot of guys on this, and also have been really intentional about building relationships in this way. And pick somebody, right? Somebody that you like, somebody that you maybe it's the person that sits around you at church, or a coworker that you know is a strong believer. And just tell them, hey, listen, whether you say, hey, I need some advice, and you lay it out there, or you get together with them for coffee or dinner to go watch a game or whatever. And open the door. Right? Because you're going to have to open the door. The likelihood that another man is going to say, hey, listen, there's this is pretty low.
Agreed.
Right?
Lead with vulnerability. Vulnerability begets vulnerability.
And you got to figure out how to be comfortable having that conversation. And reading the room and all that stuff. And if you're having a good time, it's easy to be able to do that.
And I think
it leads to the opportunity to really strengthen a relationship,
and if you say, I mean, the response of a good godly person, you've observed them. I'm not talking about just trying to do this with a stranger. You've seen somebody, they walk with God, and you're like, man, this approaching it by just saying, hey, look, I know how important, I'm realizing how important a relationship is in my life, where I can be vulnerable with someone, and they can be vulnerable with me, but I can entrust them to hear godly wisdom from them and share some things that I can't necessarily lay fully on my wife. I don't have that relationship, and I know that I need it. And so, I'm asking you to, if you can be that person that I can call, that we could talk to about some of these things. I think that just like seeking out a mentor, I feel like most people would be honored to be, hey man, I'm grateful that you saw that in me. And absolutely, I want to be that for you, and I'll be available. So then it's just a matter of following up with it and doing it.
100%. Or if you've got a situation that you're fearful of, and somebody that just recently went through it, right? Just go to them and ask them. We got some friends who just bought a house. Go and say to them, hey man, I saw you just bought a house. We're having some of those conversations about what to do. The mortgage calculators are liars, right? How did you overcome the fear of like, hey, we might not even have to do this. Right. How are we going to make this happen? How did you do it? Because right now I'm struggling to wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
Let them, be the expert and offer some things up and talk about it. And then, right, if the person betrays that trust and then you find out they talk to somebody else, don't go to them again.
Yeah.
Like, you're done.
Yeah.
Right? And then move on to the next person. You can't this isn't like dating in the sense that like you're looking for the one, right? Right. That like, if this person betrays me, then they're not the one, and now I've got to find the one.
Yeah,
no. There's an opportunity to have great relationships with a bunch of men around you. Yeah. So
you'll find these in your jiu-jitsu gym, in your church, in your church's men's group.
Yeah.
Seek them out. Go to the places where you can
within
find
your
godly
family.
men.
There's
within
a lot of us
exactly.
that have not invested enough in our relationships with our actual brothers or with
That's
our dads.
Right.
And
That's
those
right.
kinds of things. We can tap into some of that wisdom too. Yeah.
Man, yeah. So that thing, I'm grateful that we got to talk about this and that it's coming up. And I love that in the context of biblical masculinity, that's where we're hearing about friendship, because the world, it's like the opposite. No, I don't need anybody. I'm strong. Like all my buddies are, just we're topical. We don't talk about that stuff. We don't talk about our feelings. No, that's weakness. That's people that are not capable or not vulnerable. They never deal with the things that make them weak, so they naturally are weak. Yeah. Like if you are vulnerable, you only have to be vulnerable for a time until the wound is healed, and then you're strong. Yeah. So that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the steps you need to take to be strong. So I encourage you. I hope you out there will take this advice and wisdom from the book and from Lucas and I, that to go seek out those relationships, to form them, to create this group. If you don't have it, make it.
100%. Yep. Yeah. And I don't want to soapbox on this, but this is one thing that I see all the time that irritates me. First off, nobody likes that guy. Whatever that is in a given situation, don't be that guy. No. But also, being willing to start those conversations is important. But if you're the guy that goes to the men's group and you're like, nobody talks to me.
Yeah.
But you need to flip that question too.
Yes.
Who did you talk to?
Right? Were you vulnerable?
Yeah.
Were you available for other people?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing that we get. Well, I went to that thing and then nobody talked to me, or I went here and nobody talked to me. Like, who did you go talk to?
Yeah.
Right.
You ever considered that maybe those guys are just trying to figure out how to be vulnerable themselves?
Like how many of those guys are going to go home and say, well, nobody talked to me? If there's a dozen guys there, probably half of them are going to be like, nobody talked to me. Well, you're going to have to eventually go do something. If you are not prepared to be the type of person that you want to lean on, then that's where you start.
That's a great line. Yeah,
so
absolutely agree.
Anyway, there you go. I'm going to step off my soapbox.
Well, I totally agree with that. I thank you for that addition there. Well, I know we got to wrap. I'll pray for us, and then
please,
of course,
do.
You can.
We need it.
Close us out. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for this podcast. Thank you for the opportunity to get to encourage people, Lord. And as we talk, we're encouraged. I'm greatly encouraged by my conversation with Lucas today, by your word, and by this book. And I'm so grateful, God, that you're just helping to turn, as men in the church, turn our eyes toward the things that will help make us strong. Leaning into you, knowing the word of God, of course, but also, Lord, that you created us, you designed us for friendship, for fellowship, and for brotherhood, and to seek out brothers, but also to be a brother that is born for a time of adversity. And so I thank you for your word and for its truth. And Lord, I pray for every person that's listening to this, whenever they hear this podcast, whether it's when it comes out or years from now, Lord, I pray that it would hit them right when they need it, God, and that they would seek out friendships and God-honoring friendships with brothers who love you and love men and want to help them, God. And so I just pray that you put those guys around anyone who's listening to this that doesn't think that they have it. Lord, I pray that you would equip them and encourage them and teach them how to form those relationships, friendships, and find that brotherhood. But we love you, Lord, and are so grateful for the ministry, for Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu, what you are doing through it. This is your ministry. It belongs to you, and it exists for your glory. And I'm so grateful that you are opening the door for so many people to hear the gospel, and you're allowing us to make disciples all over the country and all over the world through this ministry for your glory. We love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
This has been Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu, episode 112. Pew, pew.
Go train.